slowly been more recognized within pop culture. It used to be more a niche thing, but now there are plenty of movies and other media that are based on games. But to have your game be turned into something for movies or TV, you first have to be iconic. You know, like those game characters that over the years have become so iconic that just about everyone knows them. There's Mario, the ball from Pong, very iconic. But one of the most iconic characters in games is a circle. That's all it took. With the video game market changing from arcade-style games to more full experiences, Pac-Man had a bit of trouble trying to fit into his new shoes. Quite literally, in fact. The original game just consisted of eat dots, when you run out of dots to eat more dots, avoid the undead. Which worked back in arcades, but things were different when it came to home consoles. People wanted more fleshed out experiences, not simple high-score games at home. And when Namco noticed that, the series started to spiral out of control. Adventure games, party games, evolutions of the original Maze gameplay, all of these different genres were released in just under the span of 3 years. But there was one that caught on better than any other style of gameplay they attempted: the 3D platformer. Yes, the Pac-Man World Series, the excellent duology of games, and a third one that propelled Pac-Man into the next generation. And then they gave up and started making arcade titles again. Fans yearned for a revival of the series for years, and while we did eventually get a remaster of the first game, there were some 3D Pac-Man games that most players overlooked. That's where Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures comes in? That's not Pac-Man, that's ugly. A redesign. Really? At this point, everyone knows that that's Pac-Man, and everyone knows to call animal control when this thing gets into your house. Sure, it's better than whatever the crap happened here, but it's still awful. Pac? There's only one. Well, it's sure as heck not him. However, this wasn't Pac-Man's first cartoon. The first one was in 1982 by Hanna-Barbera of all companies. On the flip side, Ghostly Adventures was a TV show aired in 2013 on Disney XD, so after you finished an episode of Phineas and Ferb, you can watch the Cheese Man with eyebrows that look like ancient Egyptian pyramids go on adventures with people who have more in common with eggs. I've never actually seen this show, but judging by the clips I found,
Now, I know what to do. So, it's time for me to start doing those things.
I don't want to. The most important part is that a 3D platformer was made based off of this show. It was released for the PC, Wii U, Xbox 360, and PS3. This game was released on PC in the past decade, so it must be on Steam. Let me have a look here and it's not on Steam. But that can't be. Everywhere I looked said it was. There it is. I'm looking at it right now. Oh no. This must have been during the
Great Pac-Man D-List of 2020.
The GPMD of 2020 consisted of the delistment of 2 games off of digital stores, Pac-Man Museum and, of course, Ghostly Adventures. Okay, so I guess it's more of a decent Pac-Man D-List of 2020, but whatever. I was able to snag Museum before they took it off stores, which is really great because 2 years later they made a sequel to it. But they're sure as heck not going to make a sequel to this game. It seems as though Bandai Namco is further trying to distance themselves from that awful, awful redesign and return to how Pac-Man was meant to be. Which is for the better, but darn it, I'm trying to make a review show here, so thanks Bandai Namco for making my life harder. If it were still available, that would be the version that we would be taking a look at today, but due to that and the fact that I can't record off of anything except my PC, that means I have to resort to emulation of the PS3 version, because Xbox 360 emulation barely exists, and the Wii U smells bad. So if you see any weird graphical bugs or text in the corner, that's why. Before we begin with the game, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the box art. Jeez, could you get any closer? I'm surprised he didn't knock out the cameraman when he took this shot.
Pac is back for a whole new generation of fans.
Journey through an original storyline with charming characters inspired by the highly anticipated Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures animated series.
Help Pac and his friends defeat Betrayus while fighting for friendship, freedom, and the future.
We can laugh now and think they're overselling the game,
But who knows, maybe all that was told to us was a sign to come.
So the game starts up with a cutscene and
It sounded important.
Why would Cersei call us and then not be here when we showed up?
Don't get your power berries in a bunch. I'm right here.
Whoa!
Ah. So yeah, everyone has voices now. Yeah, this was a thing in Pac-Man World 3, but he just sounded like a normal guy there.
Details of my sector's energy should be between me and Miss Pac. Thank you very much.
Here he sounds like, well, a modern kids show protagonist, which is the worst possible outcome. It seems as though none of the characters are even voiced by the same people as the show either. For instance, the voice of Pac-Man in the show is Aaron Matthews, who voices a bunch of other kids' shows. In the game, he's voiced by Erica Mendez, who's voiced in Fire Emblem and a bunch of other games I don't care about. In fact, all of the game's voice actors voice in different anime games and shows. I really have no idea what's going on here, but I'll try to piece everything together. So there's these orbs that need powering up by collecting the classic dots. Okay, I'm following. But then we're warned about this guy named Betrayus who attacked the city and stolen this thing called the Frigidigitator, which is used to cool down the city in case of it burning down or something. And apparently it works flawlessly too. Global warming? Solved. Also, can we talk about that name? Frigidigitator. It's a stupid modern Disney XD Cartoon Network haha funny word just because of how quirky bonkers it is. It's meant for hilarious, zany jokes consisting of characters going, "The Frigidaire what?"
Frigidaire, what's it?
So now we have to go stop him from doing whatever he wants to do with the help of the previously mentioned egg people and ghost? These aren't just any ghosts either. These are the 4 ghosts from the original Pac-Man arcade game. You know, the ones that always try to kill Pac-Man? Yep, they're good guys now, and they all have really weird redesigns. Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde are all here, and they're great friends with everyone. And they're always portrayed as heroes here. Not a single one of them ever has any negative feelings at all towards Pac-Man. Pinky over here is acting like she's his mom or something.
Aw, my poor Pac.
Speaking of which, Pac-Man apparently has parents now? Or at least he had.
You're doing great out there. Your parents would be proud.
Okay, this is too much. I have to see what's going on here. I'd better check the Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures wiki. Okay, Pac-Man's page. Orphaned after his parents Zack and Sonny disappeared after the war against Commander Betrayus. He was raised by his Aunt Sphera and went to Maze High School. I'm sorry, war? I knew this Betrayus guy was a villain, but there was a war against him? I thought this show was all about butt jokes, but no, there's war and Pac casualties in this show? Okay, between all of this and the fact that some characters just mention events that I guess happened in the cartoon, it's clear that this game assumes that you've seen this show before. I have no idea why. Then we're immediately thrust into gameplay so we can see what Pac-Man's moveset is. Okay, he can double jump, and he can chomp. That's it. The chomp has him lunge forward, so it can also be sort of used as a dive move when jumping between platforms. It's not that big a deal, but I guess it's worth mentioning. After a couple platforms to jump, we encounter our first enemy. A ghost? I thought the ghosts were good now. Never mind. Outside of a couple of other foes, these are the only enemies you'll be taking out as you progress through the level. But don't try and think that these ghosts are an actual threat to you. Nope, they're taken out by a simple chomp. You don't even need to really be near them. The chomp move just locks onto the nearest ghost, meaning that you can even chain together attacks by mashing the button, which makes defeating these spirits a cakewalk. And that's especially so, even if you take damage, there's more than enough health around you to collect. Some of them even regenerate. And this isn't just an early game thing too, this applies for everywhere from the first stage to the final. And all of this for enemies that can just be taken out with one button. Different colored ghosts do different things. Some teleport around the platform, some do other things. But the most notable one of the group is the green one, whose main attack is throwing up on you. And that should give you a good sign of what the show is like. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not vomit. The game says it's slime.
Slime time.
Right, I too have slime flowing out of my mouth whenever I see these character designs. Maybe I'd understand if I were a green ghost. And while these color-coded ghosts may sound like a fun idea for some variety, you just take them all out in the same way. Just press the chomp button. It's sure as heck better than Pac-Man World 3's melee combat, but this still sort of doesn't make sense. Pac-Man was supposed to only be able to eat the ghosts when they turn blue. Where did that go? Well, that move is still here. This meter charges up on the top left, and once it's full, you can press triangle to, I guess, scare the ghosts, so they turn blue, making them easier to chomp. The ghosts are already incredibly easy to eat, and the range on this move is very small. You can activate it, and some ghosts that are right by you will just stay the way they were. This is a pointless mechanic. There's no reason to use it, and I always forgot that it even existed. Oh yeah, and the ghosts talk. Everyone talks, and they're really gonna let you know that. Every time you come in contact with one, they're gonna say at least one line, and it leads you hearing a bunch of people's last words before death.
Go, go, go!
Sometimes you'll chomp them before they can even finish their line.
Target!
But chomping ghosts isn't all you get for the entire game. No, no, no. There's also power pellets that you can nab that give Pac-Man a special power and costume that's used to solve puzzles and take out specific enemies. Not too unlike Mario Galaxy's power-ups. But while in that game the usage of them are either timed or just stay with you until the end of the stage, Pac-Man handles them a bit differently and a bit worse. You see, when you get hit once, you lose that power-up, but not any hit points. That leads to there being basically no challenge in the sections that use them, because much like with the health to collect, the power-ups regenerate indefinitely because they're required to beat the stage, leading to infinite health in these sections. And these sections aren't simply quick changes of pace like Galaxy either. These power-up sections take up about 3/4 of the game's playtime. There's 8 different ones that you'll collect over the course of the game. The first one is this ice power-up. It's not very good. All it does is just freeze ghosts to, I guess, chomp them without getting hit. But as stated before, these ghosts serve no threat. The only times you have to use this is to freeze lava pillars to use as platforms and defeat fire ghost enemies. But the fact that this is the first one you get in the game led to something kind of weird. Just after you get it for the first time in the first level, you're presented with this line of sleeping ghosts. They weren't in any other section up until this point, and since I just got the ice power-up, I of course thought you were supposed to freeze them and use them as a platform or something. Nope. I tried doing it and they would just fall down. You know what you're actually supposed to do? Just mash the chomp button to get across, and then you're taught what this power-up is used for. The next one you unlock is this chameleon thing. With this, you can lick up stuff with your tongue and go invisible to avoid enemies, but much like the blue ghost ability, this is basically pointless. What this power-up is actually used for is swinging from poles, which is fun and all, but it comes at a cost. Now it's harder to take out enemies due to the fact that you have to be a lot closer to them so your tongue can reach. This is sort of dumb, as it's the only power-up in the game that actually handicaps your abilities. Next is the fire ability, which is just the ice power-up again. This time it's used for unfreezing ice pillars to use as platforms and defeating ice ghost enemies. How creative. But how this power-up is better than the ice one is in the fireballs you throw. Instead of shooting an ice beam to freeze enemies, the fireball gets to the point and just defeats any ghost that it comes in contact with. One of the more interesting power-ups in the game is the ball power-up, which turns you into a ball and lets you roll around and get shot out of cannons. I know I was saying how the ghosts were no threat to you earlier, but here, they can't even hurt you. It's a little clunky to control when you're at top speed because it's hard to turn, but luckily there's a button you can press to immediately stop the ball. It's a lot like the Atmosphere levels in Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, actually. There's the ball power-up, which just lets you bounce higher up and wall jump. Despite the kind of fun design, there's not really much to it. Then there's the magnet power-up, which lets you magnetically bring ghosts closer to you. Again, not that useful, but it also lets you walk on marked ceilings, basically temporarily turning the game into a 2D platformer with anti-gravity. But where this falters in comparison to something like Mario Galaxy is the fact that you have to hold the direction that you're going while walking on walls instead of just holding left or right. Like the circle here, you have to change the direction you're holding with the control stick while going around it, otherwise you'll just get stuck. This one's a bit interesting. Pac-Man inflates himself and you get to fly around as a balloon. You use gusts of air to get you up higher, lower, and move you around the level. It's very similar to the P-Balloon from Super Mario World. The final power-up you unlock in the game is the spin move, where you guide a line and then Pac-Man follows it. This is barely used in the game because you unlock it so late. All that it's used for really is going across platforms that you can't cross over without it. And you use all these power-ups in every stage to get to the end of the level, and of course whenever you get to the end of the level, Pac-Man burps. And no, this isn't just a one-time thing in the first level. He does this after the end of every level. Whatever. After you beat the first stage of the game, you're brought to what I can only assume is an attempt at a hub world. I guess this is a good place where we can catch up on all the lore of the show. For instance, this is a school. Yep, Pac-Man goes to school in this show, which I guess is because the makers of it looked at this yellow circle and said,
Yeah, Pac-Man's cool and all, but he's just not relatable enough to the kids.
There are 4 whole rooms in this hub world, and you don't even need to access 3 of them to beat the game. The only room you need to be in is the classroom, because you step on this button here and you're taken to this game's world map. The structure of this place is a lot like Starship Mario from Super Mario Galaxy 2, and at least Starship Mario had stuff to do in it, but at least Starship Mario had a fun design, but at least Starship Mario was memorable. Last I checked, the Pac-Man school level wasn't in Fortune Street. When I say there's nothing to do in these rooms, I mean there's nothing to do in these rooms. This might be cooler if you're a fan of the show and now you get to walk around these areas from it, but if they were going for that, then the area is not large enough. If you look at it from a gameplay perspective, the hub's too big, and if you look at it from the perspective that you get to roam around the areas from the show, then it's too small. Actually, I'm wrong. There is one thing you can do in the school, and that's play the arcade games. Don't play the arcade games. The only one I bother playing was this one, and it's actually kind of funny. You play as Pac-Man piloting a red helicopter and shooting down ghosts from the sky. Your main goal here is to free the civilians from the, what I guess is Jello. And then you're supposed to pick them up and take them to the exits to win, but you don't actually have to do that. You can just leave them there and let them get taken and killed by the ghosts, and the game will still advance. You don't lose a life for this either, you just have to get that number on the top down to 0 to continue the game, no matter how many people you save. And after 4 levels, the game's over. But you can't access these games until you collect a certain amount of fruit. How do you get the fruit? Well, of course, you just play the main levels. There's 34 levels in the game that's spread across 6 worlds. Every stage is a straight shot to the end with really no branching paths or items to collect. So it's more like Mario 3D World than something like 64, which isn't a bad thing at all. Games like 3D World and even Galaxy prove that this style of 3D platformer can be done very, very well. But it doesn't work as well here because the level design is basically just platforming section, enemy fighting, platforming section, enemy fighting, and so on until the level ends. But it's the power-ups that help this loop have a bit more variety. Well, that and the world-specific themes. There's 6 worlds in the game, the first one being Pacopolis. This one's really boring as it's just jumping between a couple flat platforms and eating ghosts. The most interesting ones are this one where everything is frozen over and you get to go down an ice slide, and the last one which places you in a hedge maze and you come in contact with the first boss of the game! I don't really think it's a boss. There's no special music, no cutscene introducing itself. It's just one enemy that you can take out with one hit. And this enemy does appear throughout some of the levels later on in the game, so I don't really know why this is here. The next world is the Ruins. This one's a bit better, with more moving objects, puzzles, and more variety in the stages. This one's actually pretty good. And there's actually a boss this time around. You just roll around as the Pac-Ball and try to hit these other balls into this guy's mouth. But this, and most of the other bosses in the game, have the same problem as I was mentioning earlier. They almost all have you using the power-ups, and that of course means that if you get hit, it's not really that big a deal because another power-ups are right there for you to collect. After you beat the boss, there's another stage to play in the Ruins area for some reason. The next world after that is the Nether. No, not that one. Well, it actually kind of is, but don't expect to see any gas or zombie pigmen. Nope, instead you'll find slow-moving, disappearing platforms over lava. It's the same thing, really. This stage kind of reminds me of that one level from Sonic 06, but at least this game functions correctly. There's 2 bosses this time around. The first is this dragon one, which also kind of reminds me of Sonic 06. The other one's this cook fella, and all you have to do is run around and eat all the yucky foods that he places out, and somehow that's enough to make him give up. And then we get word that the Frigidigitator is in a volcano, which is filled with ice. Why is it filled with ice? Because the Frigidigitator was made to keep things cool. Are you following? There'll be a test after this. A lot of the same things from the lava world apply here, but now there's the ice physics. Yay. So now you meet up with the pink one, who's in control of the Frigidigitator, and they're about to take it back to the lab. Somehow. But then, she's possessed by Dr. Buttocks, who's one of the many charming characters inspired by the highly anticipated Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures animated series. So now we must fight. You just get to the top of the stage here and then throw fireballs at the machine, and then the guy says, I'm out of here, and you win. But oh no! The Frigidigitator has now been destroyed, so now what are we gonna do? I don't know, it doesn't really seem like it matters. But then we have to go back to Pacopolis because, Betrayus' minions are taking over again. Remember him? This is where the game gets lazy and the level design gets even more repetitive. The most interesting part of this world is the end of this one stage where Betrayus is like, you'll never get past this, you have to defeat all these ghosts in the set time limit. But as stated earlier, you just have to mash the chomp button and the fruit's yours. And then we have this cutscene where the 4 ghosts pop up and tell Pac-Man that he has to fight Betrayus because he's gonna turn some tree of life into a tree of death or something. None of this was mentioned before in the game. I'm assuming this is all from the show. But as for the game, now we have to go back to the Netherworld for the final encounter of this game. The final stages of the game are kind of neat. They have you using all the power-ups, and it felt like they were going for a use all your skills you've learned kind of thing, which is really what you want in the last stage, right? There's 3 bosses you'll encounter in the last world. The first is this one against a dog. You just have to get it to run in these piles of whatever it is, and you do that 3 times and the level's over. This easy boss is made especially worse since it's an entire level. All of the other bosses up until this point had you go through a standard stage and then fighting it at the end. Not here though. The next fight fares a bit better though, as it's actually attached to the end of the level. It's the same guy you fought in the ruins area, but now you have to freeze these fireballs he's shooting and make them bounce off these springs to hit him. It's still incredibly easy, but at least it's a bit better. And now it's time. The final boss against Betrayus, Ghost of a Chance. It's his own level, much like the dog boss, but that must be because this boss is so extraordinary it deserves its own stage. Betrayus taunts us with his gun, presumably the one he killed Pac's parents with. That's not mentioned, and I'm just saying that to be funny and raise the stakes, and the battle commences. The first phase consists of him shooting his gun at you, and you have to jump on these pillars for the bullets to ricochet back at him. It's pretty easy, but do that for all 4 pillars, and the end. Yep, that's the end of the game, and then Pac-Man eats him because he couldn't have done that earlier? Probably when he was about to kill his parents? I mean, there was an all-out war against this guy, and you're telling me that he could have just been easily defeated by a simple chomp? Just as easy as I've been killing all these other ghosts throughout the whole game? Whatever. After one final burp, we're presented by probably the worst ending cutscene I've ever seen in a game. So apparently throughout the game, we've been collecting tablets. I guess I didn't pay enough attention to that, but I don't think it was really mentioned all that much in detail. And then, you know what? I'm gonna play the entirety of the ending cutscene, start to finish. You can call me lazy if you want, but the developers were too.
Last time, there was only a recipe for Packberry Pie. Do these new tablets have any information on them about the Tree of Life?
Other than information on how to build a crazy machine to turn the Tree of Life into a Tree of Death, that is.
Yep, they sure do.
Well, What do they say?
They say that the Tree of Life is the one source in the universe for power berries, which are the source of all power for Pac-World.
But we already knew that!
Everybody knows that.
Well, I didn't say it was useful information. Don't worry, though. We found 3 temples already. There are bound to be more. We just have to keep looking.
You know what I'm thinking?
That you want to get out there and find more temples?
Nope, I'm thinking... lunch!
Yep, that's it. That's the whole game. Left on a cliffhanger. No, not a cliffhanger. A cliff off the cliff. The story's not finished. The game ended early. If Pac-Man didn't say lunch, the game could have continued for hours longer. Imagine you got to the end of a Mario game, you beat Bowser, and you think it's all over, right? Well, no! It turns out the princess isn't saved, and the game ends. And that's Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. Hold on, I forgot there's a multiplayer mode. Despite the name, you can actually play this by yourself with computer players. It's basically a reverse version of the original Pac-Man arcade game. Now you play as the ghost, and you have to chase down and find Pac-Man. And these are the original Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde, because apparently they hate Pac-Man again. This lore makes no sense. You have to catch a computer-controlled Pac-Man before anyone does, or he eats all the pellets on the board. The ghost who catches him gets the bonus points for that round. There's also items you can grab to try and mess up the other players. Sometimes Pac-Man will eat a power pellet that turns every ghost vulnerable until the power runs out, and during this period you can see him on the minimap in the center of the screen. Okay, I thought that this had to be remnants from the Wii U version, where one player would play as Pac-Man on the gamepad while everyone on the TV tried to find him, a lot like Mario Chase in Nintendo Land, or even Pac-Man Vs. for the GameCube. But nope! In every version of the game, this is a 4-player only game with nobody playing as Pac-Man. But why? That would have been a great and clever use of the gamepad, and a fun thing that's exclusive to the Wii U version. There's 8 different maps to play on, but I only tried the first one. This might be a fun game if you have other people to play with, but by yourself it doesn't have much worth. And that's actually the end of the game. I did just about everything you can do in this game, unless you want to play those lovely arcade games. So, Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures, how is it? Well, it's just okay. There's just not all that much to say positively about it because it's so unremarkable that it doesn't do anything interesting or out of the ordinary for a generic 3D platformer. I'd say it's a bit better than some people might give it credit for, and from what I've seen of the show, it seems like the game is actually quite faithful to it, even uses the music from it as its soundtrack. So if you're one of the 4 people who likes the show, then I'd definitely give it a try. Now there's also a 3DS version, which is a 2D platformer, and maybe we'll look at that one some other time. But for now, all you need to know is that Namco realized their mistake they made by redesigning Pac-Man, and reverted back to his previous design for new games and his appearance in Smash Bros. Bandai Namco doesn't seem to want to look back on this area of Pac-Man, and that's proven by the fact that after this game, they never made another game with the Ghostly Adventures design ever again. And all peace was restored to the world. What do you mean there's a sequel?